Today we're going to do a end-to-end walkthrough of Diffgram. And here we've got some example images that I put together. And these are just a book that I had, and there's graph diagrams that are in the book. And we can imagine that diagrams could be contract signature lines, could be something of importance in a document, can be anything you want, basically anything you want to detect in there. And then on the right, I've got an image that I'm going to overlay. I want automatically, every time it detects a diagram, to overlay a heart. And again, you can imagine this could be a marketing image. It could be upon detecting something more specific of interest, prototype a system, etc. So this is a long form video. I'm going to walk through step by step and record the entire process as I go through it. And yeah, let's get started. So first thing is I go to project and then new, and it says create new project, give it a name, so diagram hearts, and the goal, well, we're trying to place hearts on diagrams automatically. And I'm going to go ahead and say create. Awesome. So I'm in the project, got help if I need it, and I can import some data. So I'm going to go ahead, and I already prepared the images on the side here, so I'm going to drag and drop and start loading all of these images here. I do need to stay on the screen until all of these icons show a plus, and on the bottom here you'll see it's processing. So since we have a minute, a little background for collecting data sets and what's a good data set, that kind of thing. You always want the images to be very similar to each other, but have enough variety that it's interesting. So there's sort of this weird balance between, there needs to be some variety, because otherwise, I mean, it's just a static, it's the same, but you want it to have certain aspects of it that are similar. And so if we look at these examples here in the preview, you can see that, it's all of the similar book, it's all from a similar angle, similar perspective, that kind of thing, but the individual pages are different. So every single page here, every single page in the image is a little bit different. And if you're just looking to prototype and get started, this is a really good way to start. If you are doing stuff later and you've got issues, or you've got different camera angles, you can always figure something else out and kind of work around it. But I'd say don't make it hard. Start with something that's relatively easy so you can have less data and make sure that you're on the right path. Cool. So we can see this is all good here. So now I'm going to say continue the studio. And now this is the first time that I'm in the studio. And immediately you can see I've got this here. If I just start trying to draw something, you'll see it says please create a label first. So I'm going to go ahead and make a label. And I'm just going to call this diagram. Now, from the computer's perspective, it actually just associates this with a number. So you can put whatever you want, but the only sort of catch is that the more difficult that you make it, so the more difficult that it is to for a human to see, the more difficult it's going to be for the computer to see. So, for example, I could create a label that says, page number 59 or something like that, and then just draw a box around here, but that's going to be really tough for it to understand. So let's stick with diagram as one example. So I'm going to create diagram. Okay, great. So I got my diagram label. And now I'm going to leave the instance type as box. So you can do different types of instances to accomplish different things, but for now we're going to just stick with box. So now what I'm doing is I'm drawing, and excuse me, annotation is a kind of interesting area, because what I'm actually doing is I'm attaching meaning that I think that there's a diagram here, right? Even when we get to here, like this, there's a finger, right? So if I was to, for example, just do this, I'd be basically telling the machine that this little part in the middle is actually part of a diagram, which wouldn't really make any sense, right? So annotation seems really simple, but the more you do it, the more you realize it's not very simple. Now I'm going to say complete. The way Diffgram works is it only looks at completed images when it trains the brain. So that way, if you, let's say, upload a whole bunch of images, and those images aren't necessarily ones you actually want to use to train, you can still leave them in there, just don't mark them as complete. So I'm going to keep going here. You can see I'm zooming in. When you're annotating, there's a concept of a tight bounding box. You can also use the hotkey C for complete. So for example, I would not want to do a bounding box like that because I'd be saying all this white space and other stuff like that is a diagram, which doesn't really make sense. I generally want it to be as tight as reasonably possible, meaning that it's as close to the extents to where these different objects of interest lie. So as I create these different diagrams, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen that it shows up, right? So I can see these. And if I want, I can click the focus mode to focus on an individual one, which can be useful if you're reviewing or if you're doing something like that. I'll say complete. Awesome, I'm gonna keep going here. Now, Diffgram has a lot of built-in functions to make annotation easier. So once we've trained a model, one of the things we can do is we can use the existing predictions as the next step in order to start. So in other words, the image would start with the algorithm's approximation of what's going on. That's actually not a very good bounding box. The algorithm would start with the approximation of what's going on, and then we would just correct it. So here, keep going. I can also share the project, so I can invite teammates to help if that was something that's relevant. All right, so we're going to keep going. We only uploaded 20 images, so we're going to go here and go here. Awesome. So you can see that we're giving enough variety because basically all of the actual diagrams are either slightly different images, slightly different angles, or they are just completely different diagrams. There's a concept of called synthetic data. And so basically it does different things like rotating the image or fiddling with it. And perfect, so now on to the next list, halfway done. And Diffgram creates that synthetic data for you automatically. So you don't have to worry about that aspect of it. You just want to upload the normal case. You don't have to worry about flipping or brightness, that kind of thing. It handles that for you automatically when it trains it. If we are having trouble seeing it, you can click the little brightness adjustment here and you can fiddle with it to make it harder or easier. Sometimes that can be really useful, sometimes not so much. All right, cool, let's keep going here. Awesome. Oh, that's very good. Cool. Perfect. So as you can see, that's a little bit repetitive. I would encourage, if you're doing this project, at a company, to enlist as many people as you can to help you annotate. So we can also go scroll down here and we see we've got the media controls, and we can click status and we can say not completed and refresh. So we've got 6 results left. So I'm going to keep going. We're almost there. Let's go to diagram. Some kind of interesting diagrams. Awesome. All right, complete. Oh, you know what? I think this image is a little bit too similar, so I'm going to delete that image. Perfect. So I'm going to go over here. And this one's also actually pretty similar, but that's right. Awesome. That's an interesting graph. All right, almost done. Perfect. Cool. So now we've reached the end of it. So if we go click here and we say completed and refresh, and we can see we've got 19 images there. So now I'm going to go over to brain. I'm going to say my brains, say, okay, there's no brains there. So we go new. And We're just going to leave it with the default directory for now. We'll talk about that later. Now, normally there's 30 images required. We're going to override that for the sake of this quicker demonstration, because it's a little bit boring watching me annotate. But normally you need at least 30, and that's just so you get reasonable results. And then for instances, we normally say at least 50, but here we've got 91, so we've already passed that. So we're going to say continue, and I'm going to call this first attempt, and default is fine, so we'll say launch. Awesome. So now this has started training, and I'll get an email when it's successfully trained. That's all I need to do to get started. It takes about half an hour. I'm going to go over to action. I'm going to say new flow. So this is where we're actually attaching the heart concept to it. So I'm going to call this heart flow, number one. That should be good. And then I'm going to say run a brain, and I'm going to select the brain that is currently training. So I'm going to say create. And we won't be able to actually use this until it's done training, but at least we can get it set up. And then I'm going to say overlay, and I'm going to overlay on the diagram label. So if you have multiple labels, they'll show up there. And let's go back. Oops, sorry, let's edit this. I'd like to upload the heart image. Cool. So just showing how you can update that as well. And that's all set. Awesome. So the first thing it's going to do is run a brain, and then it's going to try to attach the overlay. So that's actually all set, but I'm going to go and make another. So I'm going to go back to my flows, and you can see it here. I'm going to make another new flow. I'm going to call this count. So we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to run the same brain, but this time we're going to count how many times the diagram label shows up. And then we're going to do some type of a condition. So we could, for example, say, hey, there's at least, let's say 8 of them. And that shows up there. And then if that condition is true, we want to send an email. So you say create. Awesome. So to walk through what this is doing, it's going to first run the brain on the image. And then it's going to, and I'll come back to more detail on what that actually means. And then it's going to count how many labels show up. So when we were annotating it, we were creating labels. So every one of these would count as a label. So when we say run, what we're basically trying to do is get the computer to automatically recreate these boxes, but on a new image that it's never seen before. So we go back to my flows here. Let's go back to count something. And we can see here that we're going to run the brain. We're going to count how many times label shows up, and we're going to condition on it being, in this case, greater than 8. So if that's true, it's going to send an email. If it's false, it's just going to stop. So I think that's fine. Let's leave that as is for now. We can go check on our brain. So it says train. I'm just going to pause the video while that's training. That's training. Great. Now the brain is done training. The training part only takes about 40 minutes, half an hour. I took a little bit of extra time to make sure everything was working right, and now we're about an hour or so roughly into the future. So now that we have our model trained, let's try testing out these flows. So I can go over to my flows, and I can go, let's say, for example, to the heart flow. And to use it, all I have to do is drag and drop images into here. As the flow runs, it'll show up here. So for example, the one that we just run will show up right here. And I can say view, and perfect. Now it's overlaying the hearts. And you can easily change it. So if you want this to be something totally different, it's up to you. And in future versions coming up here, we're going to allow the ability to sort of position it nicely. So right now, it just does a somewhat random position near the detection, but we'll have more options to configure that coming up. If I wanted to see the specifics of sort of what's behind the scenes in terms of what it's detecting, I can go over to annotate, and I can choose a directory. So here, action hearts flow. And then here, I can see all of the boxes. So the box is what the computer's seeing, but you don't have to display the box. You can simply display whatever marketing image you want, or you don't even have to use the display part at all. You can use the counts. So earlier we created this counts thing, and I ran a few things through it to test it. This one here, it counted 7. So that's the one that you saw earlier that has 7 graphs. Let's pull that up real quick. So it's going here and it's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in this case, the condition evaluated to true, and so it sent the email, which is what you see here. So this is the example of the email that you get. So it puts the count and then the label, and I can click to view the flow. So that's the one that we were just looking at moments ago. Now, I can actually change this. So for example, I could change this to say, I want it to be greater than 10, greater or equal to 10. And then from this point on, that's how the flow is going to work. So we can see, for example, the one that we did here was evaluated to true. But if I look at the other one that I ran, which had a different condition, it evaluated it to false. And so it didn't send the email. And so you can actually use this as an alert system. So you can basically say, even as simple as, hey, if there's at least one of the objects detected, or greater than 0, then send the email. If you want, you don't even have to include an email. So you can just use it as an easy means to count and compare. And we're going to have a whole bunch of enhancements coming to this so you can do more complex things with it, but this is just the start. One of the really cool features is that you don't have to do it from the upload from the web interface. So one of the other options is you can take this email address, and let's make this full screen, and you just pop the email address, paste the email address into there, and then you can just drag and drop a couple different ones into here, and you can have whatever subject you like, and then hit send. And my email's got a 5-second delay, so it'll take a little bit to send, but that will start popping up in here. And the third option is you can talk with your development team about software development kits. So you can actually integrate this right into your application and do larger scale ongoing deploys, but you don't have to. You can also just keep using it through the email or through the interface. Perfect. So here's the 2 that we just did, and counted 7. Condition was true, so it's in the email, and now I've got another email here. So this is the one that was just 0 minutes ago. Actually, I guess 2 of them. There you go. Perfect. So you can view the different events there. And yeah, that's it. So you can keep making new flows. You can keep editing them. You can keep training new brains, different models, and it can be as complex as you want it to be. So it can be something that you just keep changing and keep improving. You could say, hey, I want to detect the page, or I want to detect something else on the page, and you can have a whole bunch of different labels. It's pretty much whatever you can imagine. I mean, if we go to the let's go here for 1 second. So yeah, let's go check this out. So this was one example we were playing with earlier for contracts. So I could, for example, send a contract thing and then detect not signed. So all you saw earlier with the labels, I just have to create a class called not signed, and then I get an answer back, and instead of saying 7 diagrams, it says 2 pages not signed. And for marketing, so you can imagine that this yellow thing could be whatever. Get somebody to design something really nice, or maybe you're a designer and you can design something nice, and you can be really specific. So you could say 18-inch silver spoke aluminum rims, and then if there's a 19-inch or a 20-inch rim, and you want to automatically tell customers about that difference, it can detect that. And then this is for the development team. So if you are a developer, you can just say pip install Diffgram. If this looks like Greek to you, if this looks like totally not relevant stuff, then just send it to your developer, or you can continue to use it through the user interface here. So Diffgram is very flexible in terms of supporting both for the code-free approach. So yeah, that wraps it up. That's actually all you need to do to get started and get value out of this technology called deep learning, which is what is powering the detection part, what's powering this automatic detection part. And thank you very much. I'm excited to see what people are going to try with this.